time for the Roots and Roots Show with your host, Greg Rashid, bringing you history and music from the Black American diaspora. The goal of this show is to empower you with information that you can then seed and grow within your community. Now, here's your host, Greg Rashid.
Well, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the universe. This is Greg Rashid with another edition of the Root Root Show. As I know, many of you listen at your convenience anytime, or be it on Facebook, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes. But a lot of people listen every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Mountain Time on KUHSdenver.com, created by the legendary, the one and only, at least a legend in his own mind, Henry Archuleta. And I want to say hi to all my friends in the Colorado region. And I'm so happy. I'm all choked up as a matter of fact. I'm so happy. But I'm so happy because I've been saying this since I've been in Thailand. But now I can do interviews on my show. And this is my first interview of the year. I'm talking with Dr. Willie Tolliver Jr. He's the author of a new book called Deconstructing Will Smith, Race, Masculinity, and Global Stardom. The book is on McFarland Press. Dr. Willie Tolliver Jr., he's a professor of English, director of Africana Studies, director of Film and Media Studies at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia. And I'm going to start the interview right now. I recorded it earlier, and there's a little cut at the beginning. That's why I had to announce the show in advance, this show. But anyway, let's hear it right now. Hope you enjoy that on the Root Root Show. I'm doing the show today because I have as my guest he wrote a great book here, and my guest is Dr. Willie Tolliver. He's professor of English, director of Africana Studies, director of Film and Media Studies at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia. And the book that he wrote is Deconstructing Will Smith, Race, Masculinity, and Global Stardom. How you doing there, Dr. Tolliver?
Oh, I'm great.
I am just
glad to be here.
I'm just loving this that you wrote this book. And I was impressed when I read that this book started out as a lecture. And talk to my listeners about that, how that happened.
Well, I won a teaching award, and the one stipulation was that I had to give a public lecture. And I was trying to think of what could I do a public lecture on. So I decided to combine my interest in film and Africana studies. And somehow I came on the idea of Will Smith as combining these two areas.
Oh.
And I got a good response from the lecture. And from there, I tried to expand it into a book.
And you did a superb job with this book because it's a needed book. And it's so ironic because when I got the book from the publisher, McFarland, I also got his autobiography that just came out, Will. And I was reading both of it and getting, and just seeing his opinion, which is, what he believes was going on in his own life. And it's fascinating, but you kind of really break down his methodology, what he's trying to do and what he's trying to bring to the world. And one thing, and have you read his autobiography, by the way, yet, Will?
I have read bits and pieces of it, but I don't know if I really wanted to go into all of the granular details about his personal life, because I was focused on Will Smith, in capital letters and quotation marks.
Right. Well, one thing, that your book, that kind of sets the stage for the whole book is, and this is ironic because what's going on right now in the world. But talk about the incident that happened in 2012 in Russia with Will Smith and the Ukrainian reporter.
Oh, yes. Well, it was during the premiere of, I guess it was let's see, Men in Black 3, that the premiere in Moscow. And this reporter from the Ukraine, was very, welcoming and enthusiastic, towards Will Smith, and leaned in and tried to kiss him. And Will Smith didn't take too well to this, and actually slapped this journalist, and it was in the news. I just remember, what a what a little bit of a controversy that was. And then I just always remembered that as sort of like an example of what happens when you have African Americans and other cultures, coming together, that what happened there, could be interpreted in, several different ways. And of course, his private space was being violated, and you should certainly understand that. But on the other hand, I did a little bit of more research, and I found out that this journalist did this regularly to celebrities, where he would do something provocative to get them riled up. I mean, for instance,
you mentioned Madonna, in fact.
Yeah, he gave her some flowers that she hated, and she just exploded. And I suddenly realized that what this journalist was doing was deconstructing the red carpet to sort of reveal to the world how stars are sort of constructed entities. And that what you had in that moment with Will Smith was him dropping his like star image. And you got a glimpse of the real person behind that. And I just thought this would be a good way of sort of constructing my whole study around this idea of revealing what was behind like the public image.
Right. And like I said before, you did a great job with the book doing that, because it's an image that he, as you say in the book, he decided that he was going to create this image. Very
yes.
early, I think he was still a teen, and he decided once he got into hip hop, this was his goal, was to be the number one star in the world. Not in the Black community, not in hip hop, but the world.
Right.
And you can say that he did become that. I don't know right now. I guess Dwayne Johnson would take that mode now.
Yes. Yeah. And ways, Dwayne Johnson. Now, in the book, I talk in my last chapter, I talk about Will Smith's legacy.
Right.
Who could possibly take over the kind of mantle that he has of being like the star that saves the world and so forth. And it's Dwayne Johnson who has, when you look at all of the films he's done, that they sort of follow in Will Smith's pattern. And then in many ways, he actually has superseded Will Smith, in terms of just money. I mean, the amount of like international box office that he has garnered and the paydays are just beyond Will Smith. So he is a very worthy successor to Will Smith.
And the thing is, he's also a successor in the sense that, as you mentioned in the book, the fact is this racial ambiguity with Dwayne Johnson, also in a sense with Will Smith, as far as he brings a sort of blackness in some of his joking in some of his movies, but also there's this whole thing like he's very safe for the white community. And talk about that a little more.
Okay. Well, certainly. I mean, you're right. Dwayne Johnson is just sort of visually, physically, racially ambiguous. But I still say that Will Smith is a kind of precursor for this, because there's a chapter in the book where I talk about racial identities and how he has constructed a racial profile that sort of encompasses different meanings of Blackness. It's kind of like hybridized. Um, it's a kind of a Black. In that chapter, I talk about the difference between like post-racial and post-Black.
Right.
And I even go into certain kinds of like literary theory where I talk about how Will Smith is able to carry the racial sign, but then he's also able to take it off. He has this kind of flexibility, this racial flexibility, that I think is one of the keys to his stardom. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I got it in the book, and I understood it's kind, because I had to read that a couple of times and say, yeah, that is him. And thinking about his movies, the ones I've seen, and how he projects on the one hand, he'll say a joke in a movie that's that the Black community will get, that maybe the white community wouldn't get, but then on the other hand, he turns right around and he's basically subservient to some people, the white folks in these movies. He's like he's almost like the I don't want to call him a character like out of the past, like Mantan Moreland or something, but he's kind of like that in a sense.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like on the one hand, and his achievement is that he's been more successful than just about any other Black actor, and in doing so, he sort of stretches these concepts or attitudes or perceptions of Black men. So in a way, it's very progressive. But on the other hand, he has to work within a certain kind of like Hollywood environment.
Right.
And that requires, as you say, a certain kind of subservience, because even though he may save the world, by the end of the film, he is put into what some people call a kind of custody, where he has like a white male character who is his buddy. He's contained by this other white male character. And even more than that, the way the films are resolved is a kind of reinforcement of like the status quo of society, which has, basically it serves the purposes of the white, controlling powers.
Yeah, it definitely does. And even in the Bad Boy movies, it's in there too. You see the same thing, even though he's teamed up with Martin Lawrence, but there's still like this controlling thing that has to follow the lead of what the white authorities tell him to do. And you see that a lot. And by the way, listeners, if you're just tuning in on the show, I'm talking with Dr. Willie Tolliver, author of the new book, Deconstructing Will Smith. It's on McFarland Press. Now, one thing that you said in the book that really it hit me, and I said, God, he's right. The movie I, Robot, you talk about the fact that in that movie, Will Smith becomes the kind of the white slave master to the robots. And talk about that a little more.
Well, it was interesting. In my research, he gave this interview where he said the director told him that in acting that part, he had to think of himself as the racist white sheriff, in the Sidney Poitier movies. So where you have this strange kind of like racial reversal, where basically Will Smith is playing the oppressor, and the robots, even though they're these gleaming white robots, they actually are stand-ins for Black people,
right,
and slavery and slave rebellions and so forth. And it's sort of interesting that most people don't really remark on this, but the thing to remember is that Will Smith's character is part robot. I mean, he has cybernetic features. I mean, his arm and certain body parts are. So when he's working against the robots, it's a kind of like self-hatred.